Saturday of last week, my clothes didn't fit as tightly. You all have treated me like a king. And I really am convinced that one of the infancy steps of apostasy and walking away from God is to not be thankful. So I'm appreciative of you all taking me into your homes and taking me into your community now for 3+ years. It is always a part of my year that I look forward to come up here. And so I appreciate you, even though I will not like you much next week as I attempt to try to get my clothes to fit the way they used to. time somewhere, even though he knew himself by the devil. John 13 would happen. We see that temptation happening. We see in Matthew chapter 4 and Luke chapter 4, Jesus being tempted, and he responded a different way than Peter did. Let me ask you this question. Simply looking at those two things, how do you respond? How have you responded to temptation? Don't raise your hand. Don't shake or nod. Just think inside your mind, because this question might be embarrassing for some. Have you ever failed the test at temptation? Like me, you have. You know why I failed? Very easily. I wasn't prepared. And so as we look tonight, let's look at being prepared. Let's start with real life Eagleville. Real life Eagleville is different from the auditorium room of the Eagleville Church of Christ, isn't it? Yes, it is. Real life Hot Springs is different from the auditorium room at the 70 West Church of Christ. We have a group of people who care about us, exclusively care about us. We have a group of people who are very supportive of us going after God. We have a group of people who are here to help us through this life. But out there, it ain't the same way, is it? Out there, in the real world, it is dog eat dog, isn't it? It is whatever I can do to help myself. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure to take care of number one, and then you guys can sort of fit in where you want to. That's real life. This is a sanctuary, a little slice of heaven, if you will, a little taste of that eternal home. And guess what? It's designed to be different from out there. If it's the same as it is out there, we got problems in here. So real life is completely different. But let's figure out how to prepare for temptation. First, James chapter 1, verse number 13. There is no better place to start with the idea of the preparation for temptation by understanding this fact. Temptation is real. Period. Real. R-E-A-L. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man, but every man is drawn away, or is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. That when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and when sin has reached its full maturity, there's death. Now, don't cut the reading off there. Go one more verse. Do not err, my beloved brethren. You think, well, why would we put that in there? That's the dumbest verse I ever heard. Well, let's just start there. You ready? Let's start that way and work our way backwards. James 1:16. Don't have the misconception that you are too good, too strong, too faithful, too whatever to be tempted. Because you're just due for a fall. Do not err, my beloved brethren. When God writes these things by the inspiration of the Holy Ghost through the pen of James, and he's writing those things about temptation, he said, then don't think you're any different. Don't think that temptation avoids you. Don't think that you can get through this life without it. Raise your hand if you're better than Jesus. Was Jesus tempted? Yeah. You think you ain't going to be? Come on. Don't you forget about that. Don't you think that it's never going to happen to you. There was a man of our congregation, and he had a daughter. And she was going through some things. Tough. Young teenage girl. She had some suicidal thoughts. One day, he walked into his house, and he had to take that knife out of his daughter's hands. And the hard thing for him was when he had to drive his daughter to that facility and leave her and sit in the parking lot and cry. That's the best place that she could have gotten that help. There was nothing he could do. Because in his foolish mind, what he thought is, this doesn't happen in a preacher's home. And it does. Don't think it won't happen to you. Don't think that you're to this or to that so that those things don't happen. Be ready for them. They're coming. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. Temptation is real. Every man's tempted. When the proper bait is used, when he's enticed, when he's pulled away, whatever tempts Eric is in front of him, or me, or you. Temptation is real, and it's going to be there. If I give into that temptation, I've given opportunity to temptation. And there's a child born known as sin, and that sin leads to death. The Bible speaks very plainly of that temptation time and time and time and time again. It's real. My sister, when we were younger, dated a guy out of our youth group. He was a large guy. He was the one of the gentlemen who play on the defensive end in football. Big guy. Nice guy. He was the All-American guy. He was the guy you would look at in the congregation. You'd think that's the guy I hope my kids act like. He was just a good guy all the way around. And I was about 12 or 13, and I wanted him to like me. And he said, let's eat some chicken livers. No, he didn't. He said chicken gizzards. Now, I don't know everything I know about chickens, but here's what I know. Chickens don't have teeth. And in order to grind those things up, there is a pouch called the gizzard. And in this pouch is also small rocks. So those things will grind up and go into the stomach and then they'll begin to be fed that way. Let's eat some gizzards. I ate 2 of them. Still hate gizzards to this day. There's a saying back home in Alabama that you can deep fry anything, and I think we have put that to the test. That might be true, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to eat it. Gizzards are terrible, but I wanted him to like me so badly that I was willing to eat those gizzards. And you say, doesn't mean anything. What about today? Really? Last weekend, or the weekend before I drove up here, my neighbor across the street cut his grass. And then my neighbor beside me cut his grass. And then my neighbor beside me cut his grass. And I looked out and I said, I need to cut my grass. I didn't think that Sunday as I was getting in my truck to go to the church building, but once they did theirs, mine looked shabby. So you know what? You don't grow out of peer pressure. It just sort of changes. It goes from chicken livers to grass. But the pool's still there. You know why? Because it's real. Notice this. Young ones and older ones, you need to appreciate your rearing. Book of Daniel, first in chapter 3, or rather chapter 1, and then in chapter 4. In chapter 1, you're going to run into Daniel, who, this is the account where Daniel talks to the prince of the eunuchs and says, let me eat mashed up beans. Not a big fan of. Let me eat mashed up beans for a week and see if I don't look better, seem healthier, run faster, all those things other than other people. And if not, then I will change my diet to follow after yours. And in Daniel chapter 4, you have these 3 Hebrew youths who were told, here's a 90-foot tall statue. Whenever you hear music, you bow down and you begin to worship. Well, they didn't. Matter of fact, they didn't 3 times. They didn't so much that Nebuchadnezzar got real mad and turned that furnace up about 7 times hotter than it's supposed to be and threw them in there. They came out, didn't even smell like fire. I want you to do a little homework, unless somebody can tell me right now. Tell me the name of Daniel's mama and daddy. Or Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah's, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's mama and daddy. I don't know anything about them. I don't know who they are. I don't know what their story was. I don't know why they're not there. But I know this about them, never hearing one single word about them. They taught their sons that God is everywhere. I don't really have to know anything else about them. I don't really have to know anything else about their names or what they did or why they did what they did. What I know is they taught their children the right thing to do, and when their children were put to the test, they did the right thing. No, that doesn't necessarily mean that if I teach my child the right thing all the time, that my child will choose to do the right thing all the time. Y'all don't even act like that's my phone. It is. But the fact of the matter is this. Daniel's mother and father, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah's mother and father reared them the right way, and that's why they had a fighting chance. Without that, where do they turn? Put yourself in the same shoes. You have the opportunity to eat like a king with literally the king's food at the king's table. Do you do it? Is that what you choose? This is exactly what Daniel turned down. You know, there was a point in which these three Hebrew youths in Daniel chapter 4, after they had gotten in trouble the first time for not bowing, when that music played, they could have said, well, let me get down here and tie my shoe real quick and make sure everything's going right there. And as you look over the crowd, while they're not bowing and they're tying their shoes, it sure does look like they are. While they're not worshiping, it sure does look like they are. You know, they refused to even bow. And at one point they told the king, we're not concerned, we're not careful, we're not afraid to tell you what we think. Our God has the ability to save us. And if he does or if he doesn't, that's up to him. Where did they learn that? How many times do you think they heard the stories of God parting the Red Sea and those plagues in Egypt? And the story of Jericho. They knew him because they were taught to know him, because they were taught right. So if you want to avoid or prepare to resist temptation, hopefully your parents taught you right. Notice this one. If you want to avoid temptation, or if you want to prepare for temptation, you better keep on reading. Matthew chapter 4, Luke chapter 4, you'll find Jesus being tempted. As a matter of fact, Matthew chapter 4 and verse 1, we'll find out after 40 days of fasting that he was led into the wilderness by the Spirit. Notice this phrase, to be tempted. The reason why he's going out there is to fulfill one of the verses you and I love so much. He was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. And we see him in one of several times where Jesus is tempted. This one just happens to be recorded for us. Anybody ever not eaten for 40 days? 30 days? 20? 10? 5? 2 hours? When I was 39 years old, I had a problem. And I did not eat for 33 days. Interestingly, if you'll do everything you normally do through the day and not eat for 33 days, you can lose 38 pounds like that. I mean, just. He said, "No, you're hungry. Just turn one of those rocks right there and one of them big old fluffy yeast rolls with some extra butter on the side. That'd be just fine." I like them big ones, or I used to. You could eat a dozen or so of those if you hadn't eaten in a while. Some extra butter, man, yeah. Why don't you throw yourself off that temple right there? God already said he's not going to let your foot dash a stone. That is, he's not going to let you get in a bind. You know what? I'll give you everything on this earth. Everything on this earth if you'll just fall down here and worship me. Every time. Every time it would be Jesus who said those three magic words. It is written. he would reference the book of Deuteronomy 3 times. He said, well, preacher, he's the Son of God. He knew all those things. He didn't even have to study those things. Look at Luke chapter 2 and verse number 52. And he grew in stature and in favor with God and with man. Was that telling me that he is studying? He is the Old Testament Jewish boy. He's being taught those things. You think Jesus just woke up and knew all those things? Think God just unscrewed the top of his head and poured all that in there when he was baptized at 30? Mm-mm. He grows in favor with God. What's he doing? Studying the things that God would told that Jewish nation to study. He grows in favor with God and with man. You know what that means? He knows how to interact with God and he knows how to interact with man. He learns how to read. He learns how to continually saturate himself in that word. It seems like temptation always comes when we're not saturated. Let me tell you a really good way to avoid temptation. You ready? You might want to write this one down. Read your Bible. Got a guy who's been going to camp with me for 16 years, I guess now. And he says this, it's real hard to sin when you're reading the Bible. You know what? That sounds like a very quirky statement, but how true is it? It's very hard to do what you're not supposed to do when you're doing what God tells you to do. Better keep on reading. Prepare for temptation. If I'm going to prepare for temptation, only the open eyes will recognize. You know that song? Be careful, little eyes, what you see. For the Father up above is looking down in love. So be careful, little eyes, what you see. It is the fact that if I'm going to see it coming, then perhaps I need to be able to see it coming. Seems odd, doesn't it? Nehemiah chapter 6. How many of you looked at Nehemiah this week? Probably nobody. I'm included in that. Why are you going to go there? So what does Nehemiah do when he's sent back his job? You want to know, here's the book of Nehemiah. You ready? 3 words, build the wall. That's his job. Go over there, build the wall. If you want a 3-word summary for that entire book, build the wall. So he goes over there and he starts building this wall back around Jerusalem. He's having a great time doing it, a lot of success while he's doing that. One problem, he's got some guys on the outside who's led by a couple of guys by the name of Sanballat and Tobiah. They don't really like the fact that he's building the wall, and they got a few other guys running with him. But these 2 guys, the ringleaders. And they start kind of putting down his work as being shoddy. And they say, and a fox could even knock that little wall down. That wall ain't worth 2 dead flies. Y'all know that phrase? No? You know it now. That means it ain't worth a lot. So they send him a note one day that says, Dear Nehemiah, we would cordially invite you to travel about 25 miles southeast and share a table of discussion with us in the valley of Ono. Love, Sanballat, and Tobiah. Nehemiah sends a letter back that says, Dear Sanballat and Tobiah, oh no, love Nehemiah. What does Nehemiah know is going to happen if he rolls down 25 miles southwest and he has a meeting with these 2 guys? Chances are Nehemiah is not coming back. There's an old saying about the desert around Las Vegas that there are a lot of holes there. You know what that means? Your body will fit in one just as well as anybody else's, huh? It's kind of a threat, isn't it? Well, what's going on here in Nehemiah 6 is definitely a threat. A threat to Nehemiah himself, a threat to the work that's going on in Jerusalem. And he said, won't you come out here? And he says, nah, well, that ain't going to happen. What if Nehemiah was not as observant and he said, oh, I'll go down there and see what's going on. They'd knock him in the head and kill him. You want to be prepared for temptation? Shake or nod. Look for it. It's there. Look for it. Look in Genesis chapter 3. Nope, Genesis chapter 4, where you find Cain and Abel. You know that particular event of history, don't you? Cain is a tiller of the soil by trade. Abel is a keeper of sheep, and Abel offers one sacrifice. Cain offers another sacrifice. God has favor toward Abel's sacrifice, according to Hebrews chapter 11, because he did it the right way. And according to verse number 3, somehow Cain changed a few things up. I think fully in everything that I have, I think Cain offered the best fruit of the ground that he had. But you know what? A banana ain't a steak. Fruit ain't animals. And the requirement of God was animals, the blood, and the fat thereof. Now, there's down this story, we generally stop right there, don't we? As you continue to read down through this account, what you hear is God asked Cain, why has your countenance fallen? And why are you so wroth? Why can I see you visibly within your face being upset? Wouldn't you know that if you did the things the way I told you to do them, that I would accept that? Now, the next verse is where we want to be. Don't you know that sin is crouching at your door like a lion? Don't you know that? Don't you know you have an opportunity to move around? Don't you know you could avoid that? Did Cain? It's hard for me to say that he knew at this point in time. I think he was so blinded by the rage that maybe he was unwilling to see it. But God would say, it's right there. Don't you see it? Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. If I'm not looking for temptation, well, it might spring out and get me. What if I'm always looking for it? Can I avoid some situations that would put me into temptation? If I just remember, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I don't go down that path. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. You and I need to walk through this world with our eyes wide open. And then we need to pre-plan to react. The most important words on this particular slide are found right here. Pre-plan. Be real honest with you. Sometimes when we react from our spine or from our simple cognitive reactions in our mind, sometimes we don't make the right choices, do we? Yeah, I don't know what I said, do you? Shake or nod. We make the right choices or not? No, not all the time. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do not. There they are, little bitty things. And we lived across the street from and a block away from the building. My older daughter is athletic. My younger daughter's in the band. I'll just let you figure out what that means by yourself. The younger one said to the older one, as they're little bitty, and she's looking up lovingly at her older sister, "Let's race to the house." And so they do. And it's a fantastically wonderful summer day or summer night in Alabama. And this particular house had a carport on it that had a concrete floor on it that had been finished so that it was slick. You know, those, I don't mean, it didn't have any kind of texture. It was slick as glass. And my oldest daughter was winning. Her problem is she didn't realize that in Alabama, every day or every night, there's dew on the ground. And those loving little feet had just collected dew after dew after dew, and she hit that slick concrete, bam, fell down, landed like this, broke her wrist, bless her little heart. To which my younger daughter went, "I win." Well, you can't argue with success, can you? No, she didn't pre-plan she knew about the slickness of that floor. She'd been living there years, and we'd talk about it almost every day. Be careful, that concrete's a little bit wet. Be careful, your shoes are wet. What she didn't pre-plan to do was to stand on that concrete with those wet shoes, and so she wasn't moving this way. When she hit it, she was moving this way. She wanted to win so badly. She forgot about the last few steps. And we want that crown of righteousness so badly. Sometimes we can forget to pre-plan. We're all going to look one place. That's Genesis chapter number 37. In Genesis 37, he's already been sold by his brothers who have been talked out of killing him. Thank you, Reuben. Joseph's already been sold. Now he's been sold twice. He ends up in a house of Potiphar. Potiphar's an interesting fellow as you read through his job. He is the head executioner, for lack of better terms, in Egypt. He's the chief head cutter offer. Okay, so if he wants you to die, he'll just carry you to work with him one day. Joseph gets over into his house and begins to work, and God begins to bless this pagan man's house because of the work and the hard work and the dedication of Joseph. As a matter of fact, he begins to be so trusted that Potiphar puts everything under his control, and he doesn't really know what he has unless he goes to ask Joseph. That must be a fantastic problem to have. I'd like to know what that's like. I don't know how old Joseph is at this time. I know he's not very. I don't know what he looks like. Seems to be attractive. Or he is attractive at least to Potiphar's wife. She says, "Look at here, look at this young thing here." And those statements of, "Look at this young thing here," turn into statements of, "Come inside this room right here." And he continually says, no, 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 no. And one day she grabs him. And this would be a great time to take off your coat too. If it wasn't 20 degrees. How in the world is it so cold here? Pulls his coat off of him. He runs away. She makes up some story about him trying to seduce her and trying to have a sexual relationship with her, and he gets thrown in jail. It's interesting what he says to her as all of this thing is going down. He says, how can I do this great wickedness and sin against Potiphar? Right? Well, it would be a sin against Potiphar, wouldn't it? It was the relationship that he's destroying on Potiphar's behalf in order to have a sexual relationship with Potiphar's wife. It would have been a sin against Potiphar. Not a guy you want to cross. That's not what he says. Maybe he says, how can I do this great wickedness and sin against Potiphar's wife? Would that have been a sin? Yeah. She ain't yours. You can't have her. Yeah, but nobody will know. It'll be all right. No. Well, whoever's there, if nobody's there, y'all need to go back to Daniel's parents. God's everywhere, right? You can't have her. She ain't yours. Yeah, but nobody will know. Be great for my career. Still can't have her. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against myself? Since this would be an illicit sexual affair, he doesn't have the right, and that's a sin against his own body. Could he make that statement? Yeah. And he makes none of those statements, even though all of those statements are true. He makes none of those. The statement that he makes is this: how can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Way, way back, before he was put in that pit, before he was even given that patchwork coat, he was being taught, once again, that God's everywhere, that every sin that's been committed from man has been committed against God, and that you need to know how that you're going to react to situations. That's what I'm going to tell you. When they hand you the bottle, it's too late. What are you going to do then? Well, I'll figure it out then. Well, you're in a world of hurt. When you find yourself in the backseat of that car, it's too late. It's too late. I'll figure it out then. You're going to be messed up. If I don't pre-plan how I'm going to react to the temptation when it comes, there's no telling what I'm going to choose. Why? Because I'm going to be choosing strictly from my emotion. And maybe I want to do this. Maybe that will satisfy me. It might for a split second. But I'm going to tell you what. You listen to this and see if it ain't true. You'll have all of eternity to think about that split second. Now, is it worth it? Is that worth it? You need to learn how to pre-plan to those things that I know I'm not going to. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do this other. So when those things are offered, no, I don't want that. As a matter of fact, it might be a point in time where I don't even find myself around those things because I have pre-planned so well. I know what's going on at this little house party. I ain't going to be part of that. The police bust up house parties here. Say just Hot Springs. Mm-hmm. Do the handcuffs fit on kids as well as they do people, adults? Mm-hmm. Oh, that won't happen to me. Yeah. When you get your phone call, call me. Go talk as long as you want to. And I'm going to tell you this. Why didn't you open your eyes and see it? Why didn't you pre-plan for that? Why did you go there? Why did you walk right into temptation? What's going on? If I prepare myself for temptation, I need to understand it's all around me. And if I'm going to live inside this world, it's going to be all around me. Notice this. You can't avoid temptation. It's just impossible. You can't avoid it, but you can manage it. You can keep it to its minimum. You can avoid some, but you're not going to avoid all of it. Because as much as you would perhaps think, I don't want to do this and I'm going to prepare to not do this, there might be someone in your life who says, I'm going to see how far I can push this. And that temptation may always be there. And I, like Peter, may say, I will never turn my back on you. I will always be there for you. Cock-a-doodle-doo. I can't always avoid it, but I can manage it. And it depends on how I choose. You know what? Everything in life depends on how you choose. We've dealt this whole week with how we choose, haven't we? We dealt this all week with how we live inside here and how we take inside here out to there. We're going to have one more opportunity to respond to the Lord's invitation tonight that's been open since Matthew chapter 11 and even before that. His invitation is your choice now, because what we have here is an opportunity to choose heaven or hell. And both of those destinations depend on how you choose. You've heard all week. Hear what God has to say and believe those things. You've heard all week. Repent of your sin. Confess that Jesus is the Christ. You've heard all week. Be baptized in water for the remission of your sins. Be raised to walk in a newness of life. You've heard that all week. You won't hear it tomorrow night. Tonight's the last night, at least for this gospel meeting. How are you going to choose? Will you choose to be his child? Will you choose to walk away? Your eternity is literally resting in your hands. And in just a moment or two, you're going to make a choice that's going to affect that one way or the other. Let me encourage you. Make the right choice. If you've already done those things, brother or sister, and you find yourselves looking around and this not being the house of God, but a hog pen, stand up. Get out of that place. Come back home to that God who's waiting for you, to that church family who's waiting and praying for you. Because what you have in your hands also is a choice. What you have in your hands is also a choice of heaven or hell. Everybody in this room has that choice in their hands. Now make your decision while we stand and sing. Patiently